It's not sense in the world at all. Omnom yodua, omnom. However, in truth, yodua it is now. The shoyresh hakelim, that the root and the source, and to go even deeper, the enabler of kelim, hu mibchinas ho'er makif dafka. It is due to the bechina, to the aspect of the makif. And the Rebbe says dafka. Dafka means exclusively. If not for the makif, there could not be the development of kelim. And I'm obligated to discuss this and to bring this forward so we can understand what is behind these words. First of all, we say mi bechinas oir makif, which means not the oir makif per se, but the overall effect of the oir makif. Let me explain what that implies. And I'd like a feedback to see whether I'm coming through. You sit in the room and there are other people in the room. There are occasions where the other people are recognized by you. You actually communicate with them. Then there is a situation where the other people are present in the room, but you're not really in interaction with them. You're still aware of their presence, but you're not on the level of interaction. This awareness of their presence is called bechina. You're aware of their presence without a direct contact. Translate that to the mind.
It's called what? What is the term you just used?
Please, bechina.
Oh, bechina, I'm sorry.
Bechina hoyamaki. This is bechina. Bechina means you know it without coming in contact with it. I explained many times that what bechina means literally test. In nowadays, I mentioned many times, the testing phenomenon has come clear. Where medically we test the content of blood, even though observation of the blood, you don't see what's in there. But you test it on the chemicals, it reveals to you what there is in there. When you say bechinas or makif, means not that something you look at the makif and you can readily identify it. It is by recognizing in an indirect manner the principle of makif. What is the bechinas or makif in our humble experience? So we mentioned many times, we are never in a vacuum. There's always the overall reality that encompasses our world. You can call it sky, call it space, call it whatever you want. But there's just always a sense of reality around us. This sense of reality is not something that we can define and identify, but there is the effect of it. You don't feel at a loss. You don't feel you're in a vacuum. This is bechinas oimak. You sense it, but you do not have a definition for it. The principle of Kalim, the Rebbe says, Yodua it is now that the principle of Kalim is rooted. Root means it's enabled by the fact that there is the effect, bechinas, of the Makif. As I said, I'd like to bring it down to our level, to a factual level, which is only an allusion to the truth, but just to bring it down to the thought process that we're involved in. We have our kelim. We have a cup of water. We have water in a cup. The cup is something which is very tangible and very real. And we can identify it as an entity unto itself. Almost separate from everything else. Almost outside, but in its own reality. Yet in truth, and we are quite keenly aware of this, that this almost reality of the Keli is actually due to the fact that the Keli is within an overall encompassment. Just as we said the other day, a table is a table when it is within four walls of a house. Without that encompassment, it's just boards in a certain form. It's not a table. Keli means something which is a means of presentation. It's a presenter of oil. Presentation of oil through Keli requires that the Keli would be within an oil makif, within an overall reality. Within this overall reality, then the Keli can present certain specific moments. Principles. If there were no makif, an overall reality, then these principles could not be brought out. So the principle of kelim, of presentors, the means of taking a certain idea and presenting it as such, this idea by itself. This is the kelim. That is possible only because the kelim are encompassed in an overall reality which is called Oyer Makif. If not for this Oyer Makif, you would be completely oblivious to what the kelim is speaking about. I hope this is sufficient. There's more to talk about it. Everyone can explain can focus in and see what this is about.
Yes. Can we ask something about this?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, because something new is being explained now. That how that the kaile, through the kaile, the oil is surfacing. Is being surfaced. I mean, certain elements of the oil or the whole oil, but it's being presented to the human being as which would not be able to be presented without the kaila. So so it was explained now that what the kaila is doing, it gives the oil an overall reality. And why, when it gives it an overall reality, then it's being able to surface from the oil this aspects which is being surfaced.
Wow, you're going in circles, my dear friend. The Keli, okay, let's see if we can follow this, okay? The Keli is a tangible entity. The principle of a tangible entity is to take something, to put something in a keli, and to have that something which normally on its own cannot be transported. When you put it in a keli, now it has a means, it is contained in the keli, and therefore you can transport it. You can't transport water by itself. When you put the water in a keli, you can transport the water. So the Rebbe explains what, in fact, is the principle of this keli. The keli identifies. The Rebbe says, the keli identifies the makif reality at a limited level, at the kelim level. The oil makif is the fundamental reality of the creation itself. This is something which only the Rebbe can provide. He creates it yesh me'ayin. He makes a yesh me'ayin. Once there is this yesh me'ayin, there is a sense that there is an overall yesh that contains everything. This is called the makif. This overall yesh allows for a subset of this overall yesh. This subset is called a keli. When they have a yesh within a certain environment that identifies certain specific realities, such as, said many times, Chochmah, Bina V'das, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, and so forth. And what we're saying here now is what enables the identification of these specific realities. It is the fact that they are contained within the Or Makif. There's an overall reality. This is what enables to identify various aspects in this overall reality. This is the Shoresh HaKeli. Or Makif Davke.
Okay, this is what I'm trying to understand. Why do you need the overall reality to identify the certain aspects?
Okay. Okay, thank you. At least we have a clear question. I'll try to explain it from the outside, and then let's see if we're missing, then we go inside. Anything specific has its limits, its beginning and its end and its middle. In order to have these dimensions, beginning and middle and end, now we say beginning of something. The word beginning means that this is something where this starts relative to something else. This begins. Before that, there is something else that where this is not recognized. Beginning means you're beginning something relative to a background where this is not present. But if there is no background, then there is no beginning. A beginning means this is within this overall reality. This is where this particular thing begins. But if there is no overall reality, if it doesn't contain, it's not contained any place. So this particular presence does not speak for itself. Let's take it very, very simply. You take a rock and you throw it. Pick it up from the ground and you throw it. and the rock flies and it lands someplace. This is a reality that we experience. Let us say, if this rock came to your hand, not because you picked it up from your hand, from the ground, it just flew into your hand out of nowhere. And then you throw it, and it flies nowhere, indefinitely. Then you can't even identify that anything happened. A rock has to have a base where it's being picked up, and it has to be an end where it's flying. If it doesn't have these two dimensions, it doesn't have its own identity. This is the pshat, that the makif is what gives identity to the kli.
Rabbi Paltiel, could you say that the or makif is the reality from that provides the yesh me'ayin? The keli is yesh me'ayin.
I don't understand what you.
In other words, at the level of the or makif, this is AYIN. The keli is the yesh that comes from that AYIN. In other words, in the or makif is the beginning of everything.
Right, so it's not ayin. If it's beginning, then it is a yesh and a makif level.
Yeah, I follow that. But you said about about this higher level of makif, that there even is implied within it a that which will come later. In other words, it doesn't have a direct relationship on of what's below it, but it is there.
It is there, and if it is there, it is not ayin.
Okay, so are we okay? Good. So then we're saying that the or makif is not an AYIN.
Right.
Okay. Okay. Good. I have to.
If it were ayin, then it would not be makif.
Okay. Good. Good. All right. All right. Good. Okay.
That's what the Rebbe says right in the beginning of this ois. Makif diyak, there's a shachas of ho'elamis.
We're not talking about makif da'ak now.
I'm sorry. I missed that. I have a phone ringing here. I'm sorry. I missed what you said, Rabbi Paltiel.
I said, your question, if you look at the very first line on ois summer base, makif diyak, it's a makif, the komikim is a shachas of ho'elamis. It's not ayin.
I thought we were talking about the other makif, not the Eagle Hagadol right now.
Any makif, if it has an effect, it is not ayin. Then the Rebbe says, "Mak Eagle Hagadol eili shayches el ho'ilomis." And then it is a different kind of makif.
Which makif are we talking to? Or are we talking about when we say that the shirish of the kalim is rooted in the makif?
Good question. it cannot be a makif that is ayin. And in order to understand these words, Sheresh HaKelim, the makif, you have to understand the term. We tried a little bit, but what Sheresh HaKelim. And then the Rebbe says, Sheresh HaKelim is mibechina zo'er makif. Mibechina zo'er makif means the effect of the makif. Not from the presence of the makif, but the effect of the makif. Dafka. This is what enables Kale. Okay, so we are first entering this arena. And we are first challenged to understand what is makif in fact. Is it ayin? If it's ayin, there cannot be a church for anything. If it is a mitzvah, so why is it a makif?
If it's a metzias, why can it be not a makif?
Because a mitzvah, by definition, has a beginning and a middle and an end, as a limit.
Right, but it could contain in the makif, like in a kaila, it could contain certain things.
Yeah, the principle of makif is not, it happens to have things inside. Makif means by definition it's a makif. It is higher than mitzvahs. Which is a makif. If you have a water in the keli, doesn't make the keli a makif. Makif means it's in a different realm. It's not in a mitzvahs realm. It's a higher realm than mitzvahs. It can only be surrounding. Whereas if you have a cup, the cup is made of physical material.
But in the Maimer itself, even on Tehirei Lua, the Rebbe says that the Igala Gudel is after the Tzimtzum. And if it's after the Tzimtzum, it cannot be ayin. And the Rebbe says it's makav lo'olam.
One second. The next line after that. Makiv lo'olam acharat tzimtzum. What's the next line?
Before the Rebbe says it's makav.
No. Follow through.
I know, but before the Rebbe says
No, that's why. What does it say? Read it.
I'm reading it. The Rebbe says, "Say makif lo'olamus acharat tzimtzum." Even it's makif, ein lezeh shayches lo'olamus. It's still makif, but it's makif. The Rebbe says it's makif. It's
makif, but ein lezeh shayches lo'olamus.
Okay, but it's still makif.
How's it a makif if it has no shayches lo'olamus? This fluctuation is required. If we want to understand, we cannot skip any. If Makiv Leilomis Acharat Tzimtzum into the Shachat Leilomis. What's going on? So it's not that obvious and that simple. And then the Rebbe says, after all that, in the Shachas of Oilomis, and yet, Omnam Yodua, however it is also known, there's a Kelim, which is a Makiv Davke. The Kelim are rooted in a Makiv Davke. But they say Makiv has no Shachas to Oilomis. So what does it mean that the kelim are rooted in this? Makif is no shachas and oil, it's kelim are world. All right. And again, I have to remind everyone that we are learning this by mutual and universal consent. In other words, we want to get into these intangible aspects. This is not a necessity. We can learn Hasidus that lends itself much closer for our own sake, our own experience. I opened up the question many times. Do we want to pursue this? This is, you're walking, so to speak, in an intangible reality. And we pursue it only by mutual consent. Okay? So that, what's the point of this? The point that I'm making is that no one can come back and say, listen, you're explaining what you're not even explaining. Yes, indeed, I'm explaining and not really explaining. So how am I supposed to know it? I'm supposed to know it from your own seichel. This is not something that can be presented to you from outside. This is something that you will have to recognize from your own, from as an insider to this reality, rather than as an outsider. Okay, now that I have kind of explained myself, as I said, no, I cannot explain it in a conclusive manner, so to speak, a complete presentation. I can only allude to it. Allude to it. Yeah. Again, should we continue? Hello?
Weiter.
Yeah. Okay. Remember what I said. Okay. So the Yigul HaGodl, Shelifnei HaKav, we already explained what is the principle of Yigul HaGodl relative to the eagle that comes from the Kav, Makir with the Kav. The difference between the Yigul HaGodl and the Makir of the Kav is not that this is Godel and this is Kot. Yigul HaGodl is a reference to a different kind of eagle. What is the difference between Yigul HaGodl and the Yigul HaKot, so to speak? The Yigulim that are created from the Kav. The difference is that the Yigul created from the Kav is after the Tzimtzum. Yigul HaGodl is before the Tzimtzum. Actually, it's not before the Tzimtzum, it's after the Tzimtzum. But
Rabbi,
this
you
is
said it's before. You said it's before, but it's makif l'olam is after the tzimtzum.
after the tzimtzum. So what is the Sigul Hagodl? What is the pshat? It's Igul Hagodl. It's makif l'olam is achra tzimtzum. But it itself is Igul Hagodl that is not effectuated by the tzimtzum. And then we say, Ein lazeh shaychus elo ilamis. So the union of Igul Hagodl versus the Igul of the Kav is the Igul of the Kav is revealed intently to effectuate world, to enable world.
The eagle of the calf has an eagle.
Yeah, sure.
Talking about Adam Kadmon, no?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The eagle that comes along with the oiris that comes into the cup. In the cup there is the pnimi and there is a makif. Then there is Igul Hagod. Okay, let me see if I can encapsulate the principle of Igul Hagodl relative to the eagle that shows up throughout the process of the calf.
The calf means not an eagle. The calf means it has a line. Where is the eagle mentioned in the calf?
In this line of the calf, there's always two aspects. There's the makif and the pnimi. Just as in our own thought process, we have machshava, dibur, and maisa. It's on the lowest level. Maisa is something which is created externally. Dibur is also something which is created not externally, but for the purpose of external expression. Machshava is something which is part and parcel of one's own experience. And yet, there's a profound difference between machshava and the seichel that it contains. The seichel is part of the fruit of the neshama. Machshava is when it is mislavish in the lavush, in the garment. When it comes a mitzias. So machshava is also a makif in a certain sense, in a very real sense. Yet, it is a functional koyach. And it surfaces, it comes forth when you are trying to identify something to oneself in terms of one's own seichel, one's own midas. You don't need machshava. It is something which is part of the neshama. So that part of the machshava, of the truth of the truth of the seichel, the truth of the midas, is part of the neshama itself. Is not an expressed presence, and it's not part of the machshava. There's no shaykhs to expression. Although this is what enables machshava ultimately. This is a representation of these few lines that we are struggling with at the lower level. And again, I'm opening up the question. Do we want to pursue this? There's a very subtle, intangible element. We don't think along these lines normally. These are not questions that bother us as we are learning Chumash, for example, or Gemara or Halacha, or whatever it is, or Him Chassidus. Okay. All right. Back again. Omnom Yodua. Again, Omnom means in truth. Rooted in what Omuna. Omuna is something that we know without having gone through the process of discovery. This is the truth of the neshama itself. And at that level, it is Yodua. It is fundamentally known. The Shoyresh HaKeilim, not the source and the root of Keilim. What does Shoyresh HaKeilim mean, the root of Keilim? Root of Keilim means what enables that there should be a Keili distinct from the oil. Normally we speak in terms of oil, the gilu, the truth itself. Here we're talking about Keili, a means of grasping this oil and translating it on a worldly level. Giving it a presence on its own, not only as oil, which is a revelation from the source, but it becomes a presence of its own. That's okay. What enables that there should be such a thing as a keli, a tangible presence that can contain and transport the oil in it? That's a keli. Again, just to actualize this, Seichel is an neshama insight. What substantiates, what makes Seichel real, is the oil makif of the neshama. But seichel, as we are contemplating it, we are constantly putting into kelim, putting it into place. We're giving it a definitive meaning, place. So like kelim. We're going from place to, from thing to thing, from concept to concept. Although, overall, seichel is a neshama inyan. As we pointed out many times, just to bring it back to focus. You can train an animal to walk straight, but you cannot train an animal to think in seichel. Seichel is a divine gift in the neshama, human neshama, and the animal seichel, neshama nefesh does not have it, and you cannot train it to recognize it. Okay. So coming back to where we are learning. In truth, in truth means the way things are their divine source. Divine source means the way it is being created from the divine effect. Yodu, it is now the shoyresh hakelim, that the source and the basis, the nerve for kelim, mibchinas mafke dafke. It is from the bechina, from the aspect, meaning from the fact that there is an overall element, rel called maki. Again, the motion for this is oil makif. The keli, what's the correlation with keli and oil makif? The correlation is in our motion. When is a cup significant to fetch water? When you're drinking the water inside a house.
Time check. 10-2.
All right. Just want to finish this.
I would say, since we had so many questions in the beginning of this year, we should just continue now.
Yeah, Rabbi wants to finish the mushal. He just said that.
We should continue for the whole 10 minutes.
Rabbi said he wants to continue the mushal right now.
All right. Just want to finish this scene of We'll see. Shoyresh hakelim and b'chinas oil makif dafka. What shoyresh means what enables, what makes sense, what gives the cable a sense of presence. It is from the bechina of the oil makif. Oil makif means that which represents a makif reality. Makif normally is something which is not presented, is something which is true because of the source of reality. But then the Indian oil makif, how it is presented at the creation level. as if to say that the makif is also a creation. Although makif is not really a creation. But in the creation, there is what's called the bechina of a makif. The sense that there is a surrounding and overall reality. And this sense of real reality provides for the use and identification and sense of meaning for Cain. And this is it's called Bechina Zohar Makif because the Oyer Makif is something that permeates the entire existence. But you have to be sensitive to it. Just when a person is in the house and is drinking water, even though drinking water has nothing to do with being in the house. But in a house, he's going to drink water in a certain way that is respectful of the location where he is. This is the makif, how it affects the functional aspect. And this was Bechina Zohar Makif. It is not something that really has a direct effect, but it is due to your seichel that you're sensitive to it. Okay. All right. You're now open to questions.
The question in the C was because Rabbi Paltiel asked for feedback.
Okay, fine. So, if I may, we had earlier conversation about a makif. On a local level, you have a beginning and an end, and you need a wider background to provide for that. So, I'm still looking at why would a makif have no shaykhus to olamos. I always thought that a makif is just like the next level up. So you have a table, and it does tell me if this is accurate, that then the house is a makif for that table. It's a surrounding reality. But the house is obviously still has relationship with olamos. Around that house, the neighborhood. Around that neighborhood, the local county, etc., etc. And this is seen organizationally, this is seen, and it just seems like every higher level is called a makif for that lower level. But it does have a relationship to world. But here I don't know if that seems incorrect, because now we're talking that makif is sort of absolute, no relationship to definition, no relationship to world. So I'm kind of not clear what we're dealing with.
All right.
Great question.
Okay, so we have a universal question over here. So clearly, in order to get into this question, we have to translate it in some kind of a factual situation, which we call a moshel. And the moshel has to be something very, very obvious and very simple, very down to earth. All right. So let's get down to try to identify this reality that we're talking about. You have children who need to be educated. They have to be educated at the lowest level, which is called olive base. In order to be educated with olive base, they need to have an olive base chart. They need to have individual desks. And need to be a place to be pointed to specifically which letter in the olive base they're learning. Now, this principle that you want to teach your children olive base, what makes you think that you should teach your children olive base? Or better still, what makes you think that it's possible for you to teach your children olive base? The kids are completely oblivious to the whole thing. And again, as you are teaching the children olive base, you are clearly discerning that you're not teaching them to repeat after you the olive base. You're teaching them how they can identify with the olive base themselves. They can sense the significance of the olive on the base. To teach them how to repeat is not called teaching. You are trying to reveal by them their own inherent, innate understanding of the significance and of the value of olive base. Where does that significance come from? This you're trying to reveal by them. That means it is inherent by them. And you're just trying to bring it forth. How do they have it in the first place if they haven't learned the olive base? And the answer is that this childish mind that is playing in the dust, so to speak, is very keenly aware that this clay, whatever they play with, is in this particular place. This particular place is encompassed within the bigger place, all the way to the point of the place where it is, where it belongs, but it's real. Where it begins. What makes things meaningful to happen. Let me explain the word meaningful to happen. You go into a house to protect itself against the rain or the wind or whatever it may be. This is not what identifies a house at the real human intelligence level. This is lahabdul, but how the animal reacts to a house. The human being perceives the house as a fundamental self-identity. The human being creates the house whether or not there is rain. Because a human being has to have a personal place, self-identity, whatever he is. He has to have his home, his personal private abode. This is not created by circumstance. This is an expression of the reality of what a human being is. He invents this whole thing. He invents it. Miyesh miyai.
Okay, so I'm not sure I'm following how this is, how this addresses how this clarifies it. The student with the aleph base, he's dealing with something of ultimate value and ultimate meaning, and that was the point there. That
Yes.
right.
Yes.
Okay. Fine. So, but that being said, he's still surrounded by more like localized makifim, like his local Rebbe, his father. I mean, these guys. I mean, are we saying that those are not really, the house is not really a makif for the table? Or we're saying it is, but it's not really the ultimate makif. I'm just trying to get clear on what
The
we're
latter.
Got it.
Every makif is a makif. But the reason a makif is a makif is because, due to the fact that there's an overall reality that encompasses the whole function, human function.
Right. So, and these local makifim do have a shaykhus to olamos, but they're on the other side of the coin. They're all rooted in a makif that ain't no shaykhus to olamos, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
That creates world.
Okay. Great. Thanks. Go ahead.
There's questions. If not, I'll ask.
Go ahead.
As was said now that the human being in the house, is it correct to say that the house is a makif and the human being would be the oil, and udam shayin labayis and udam, he gets actualized as a adam when he is in the makif.
Odom is not oir. Odom is an actual presence. The whole creation is for the sake of Odom. The oir v'keli aspect as applied to Odom is at much lower level of how a human being uses the worldly presence. And the reason that the human being uses it in this fashion of oir and keli is that the human being wants to reveal in the world the significance of what this is about. In order to do that, He has to go down to the levels of oil and keli. Let's take this factually. When you take a cup of water and you drink the water from through a cup, the water is water, and you drink because you're thirsty. But there is some kind of message, significance in the fact that you're drinking water through the cup. What is the message? The message is that yes, indeed, you have to drink water. But while you're drinking water, you're not giving up, you're not losing your status as a human being. You're not giving up, so to speak, the human self-respect. You're going to drink water in a way that will support or substantiate and recognize that this is a human being drink water, not a Labrador dog.
So the kaila helps him to remain in status.
That's right. The keli and oil helps him to distinguish the various parts of what is happening.
I'm not getting the last point. I asked if the kaila helps the human being to remain in status. So what was the answer?
The answer is yes. The breaking down the components of all of a given activity. That there is the oil and there is the keli and there is the mokim and the place and so forth. This is what enables a human being to function without losing his status as a human being.
The keli and the R?
The keli and the oil.
And why is it helping the human being? Because it's breaking down, because like it creates a structure.
No, okay, that's a very good question. Not because you're creating a structure. Because it enables him to use it functionally without losing himself in it. Let me give you a very simple illustration. You can drink water by jumping into the lake. But this is not, the fish jump into the lake. Human being doesn't jump into the lake. He takes the water out and feeds it to himself. It's the same water. But he's drinking the water without giving up his status as to who he is.
This is what I asked in the beginning. If the kaila gives him the ability to remain in the human status.
Yeah, I said yes.
And I'm asking how, because I know it's happening, but what does the because
What is happening is that he takes it from wherever it is and brings it back to himself.
And why can't he take it directly? What does the kaila add to it?
The keli is the means by which he can bring it back to himself. If not, the keli would have to go into the lake, and that would nullify his presence.
So to say like the kaila is a mamutza between the human being and the water.
the word mamutza does not fit into this. A mamutza is something that has its own stance, its own function. The keli is not a mamutza. Keli is a tool that the human being uses.
Okay, it's not, but it has the aspect of a mamutza. It has both ends to it. It relates to the human being and relates to the water.
The keli, the water is in the lake. The keli does not relate to the water. The keli does not tell you this is water. The keli is exclusively a human creation to bring the water to the human being. It does not give identity to water.
Is the point this that he doesn't jump in the lake? Is the point that the keli enables the man to stay above the world?
Stay above his functional aspect, not about the world. He is in the world, but he's not limited to his functional aspect. He has to drink water.
He does have to drink.
He has to drink, but it doesn't define him as a drinker.
So it helps him stay above that functional level.
That's right. That's right. If you look at the animal, they're constantly burning down to the ground, constantly eating the grass, and constantly drinking the water.
So it's like a simon that he's in the world and above the world.
He is, that's right, above the world. He has his own function. He has to be in the world, but his function is not to be in the world and to partake in the world, but to build something in the world. As a matter of fact, the need from the human being is to build something that is novel. He designs his own home.
Yeah, novel here meaning sort of a little otherworldly, like a little bit outside of world, right?
Exactly. A human perspective. The world does not present a home. The human being invents the home concept.
Okay, and one more thing. I'm going back to what was said that the eagle is in the calf. I don't know.
There is a gulim at every level. At every level there is the eagle. Let us take it very, very simply. You learn our base. Olive base is a specific thing, an olive and a base. Now, typically today we have the olive base chart. What is the significance of the olive base chart? Even though each letter is a letter unto itself, the olive base chart, before you start, tells you right away that these letters that you're learning are not letters to function independently of every other one. These letters are meant to interrelate with each other. The interrelationship of these letters creates words, which subsequently creates sentences and paragraphs and so forth. You're not learning letters per se. This you know from the beginning on. But you're not learning letters to know letters. You're learning letters because this opens up a whole perspective, a broader perspective that includes many levels.
I cannot help thinking from this mashal of the father teaching Aleph Beis. You had your own experience with your children and you taught them Aleph Beis. And I'm thinking of the idea of Makif. The ultimate Makif of a father teaching Aleph Beis is that the child should become a Talmud Chacham. And we have a perfect example in your son, Yossi, who created inside Hasidus, who is, I think, the ultimate Makif of your teaching Aleph Beis.
I am very happy to hear that. Yossi has exceeded my teaching way manifold, but yes, hopefully this is where he started.
I'm listening to his shiurim. He's a gown.
Yep.
So okay. So I'm trying to understand. So what do we say on every step on the calf? There's the eagle too.
Yes. Every step of the Kav, everything, every letter that you learn, you have the cognizance, the recognition that this is part of a bigger message, not a message by itself.
Okay. Yeah. Yasha koyach.
All right.